Good afternoon, everyone. Tractorman 44 here. Well, up till now, you saw a bunch of disassembly. We tore the thing all to pieces. Of course, there was no getting around it; it had to be done. And you can see everything behind me, most everything behind me. But today, I'm actually going to start making a couple of cuts, going back with the new subframe. So we're actually going to begin the reconstruction just about now. So hopefully, it'll go a little easier than coming apart. Coming apart is difficult. But here you can see I got my got the gooseneck here. It's all supported up. I've got a dual set of chain falls there where I can hold everything nice and level and square with that one trolley, and that way I'll be able to adjust either one chain fall or the other to cock it forward or backwards to get my level, and that'll make it to where it's much easier to connect the subframe to the gooseneck risers. And then as far as leveling left and right, my homemade jack stands under here, those tri-stands, those are just made out of scrap black iron pipe, and then you can obviously see where the trailer used to be. That's the empty spot between the risers right here, the gooseneck risers, and what is the rear of the trailer, that 3x5 angle iron back there, which support the bosses for the hinge pins for the trailer to dump. So yeah, we're going to begin right now cutting the subframe pieces right here, 140 inches long, out of 2" by 6" or 6x2 by quarter box tubing. And once we get those cut, then we'll square up, plumb, level everything before we ever tack anything into place. That's the game plan. And you can hear my shop dog Layla over there giving me heck. You know, when you hear people talk about oldies but goodies, they're usually talking about old rock and roll music, or possibly even old country and western music, or maybe an old car or an old truck or an old farm tractor. But when I'm talking about an oldie but goodie, as far as my shop is concerned, I'm talking about this old bandsaw here. Now, I have no idea how old the bandsaw is, but you can see the ornate castings and all the curvature in the ornate castings in the legs. Have no idea what brand it is. There's the tag. I've never even wasted my time cleaning it up. I had to do some things to the gearbox and also to the little hydraulic cylinder that drops it. I had to clean up, the guides and all that stuff. Had to do some adjusting and some things like that to get it to function correctly. But this is my oldie but goodie. This is what we're going to get ready to cut that 6" tubing with. Here's probably a little better, newer model. It's a smaller version. This is a Wilton here, and it's actually a pretty good one. But I'd prefer to use the big old boy here for this much larger tubing. This thing takes a 10-foot 6" blade. Hopefully cut really close to our mark. I like to ease into it real level, real gentle. I use a cutting oil and put in this little pressure pot. Put about 75 pounds air pressure in it off of the air compressor and just let it do its thing. It's airtight. It holds its pressure for a year at a time. It's really a good old machine. I like it. This thing has a 16" throat. When I slip the guides all the way to the extremes, it will cut a 16 inches in between them. See a little smoke coming out of there. It does generate some heat. I'm using a bimetal blade. It's a pretty good blade. It cost me like $48, and you got to be a little careful with them, with what you cut. When they cost that much money, you want to make sure they last as long as possible. But we'll get a good square cut. There she is, automatic shut off and everything. Right about now, I was lamenting the fact that my son had to work that particular day. Kind of rough, muscling those big old heavy pieces of tubing around and missing all the parts and pieces that got set in the general area of the bandsaws. Now, I said I never cleaned that off before, and I hadn't. But then after I told y'all about it, I got the rag and WD-40 and cleaned that up. This is a Kalamazoo brand metal cutting bandsaw from Kalamazoo, Michigan. There's a little small hydraulic cylinder there, and it's got a little flexible shaft I had to install. I actually had to come up with a way to cause it to work. There was universal joint in there, and that was just boogered up. It would not work at all. But I made a flexible shaft out of a seal pick, a 3/8" seal pick, for repacking commercial valves. And then you can see how easily you can just release that. You can increase and decrease the rate that it falls, and it works out just as smooth as can be. Now the physical size of this thing is kind of, you can't really tell it in the video, but this thing is pretty doggone huge. And the amount of weight on that thing, pushing on the blade, you very seldom ever have to add any pressure to it. Now when you use this consistently, and I do every time I have a fairly large project, but I don't have those very often. But anyway, it's got a little brass lever. When you flip this brass lever, but this is essentially a half nut, and you can grab a hold of this and you can just jerk it, and the half nut's open. You can slide it all the way back much quicker than actually turning the handle, because that's a big long thread rod, but the half nut allows you to zip it in and out very quickly. You got to admit, this thing is really pretty cool. If you look at how ornate all this casting is and all these adjustments and everything, it is really a cool old machine. It's one of my favorites. It's very old, 80 years old or so. They don't make them like this anymore with this nice cast iron base. A lot of these things they're dying and going to, what do they call this, steampunk? Kids like to take these things and make, end tables out of them, coffee tables, whatever. And so they destroy the machine, but then they use these ornate cast iron bases and paint them and all that kind of stuff, or leave, some of the times, they leave the patina and everything on them. But, yeah, it's kind of aggravating for people that like old tools, but, to each his own. Once somebody buys something, it's theirs to do what they want with it, whether they take it to the junkyard or make a steampunk end table out of it. There's obviously going to be a lot more cutting on this project, so I thought, well, I'll go ahead, clean this up a little bit, spray WD-40 on, cleaned it up. To see how this is latched, because it's not released, I flip this up here, this half nut up, and I grab it and I can slide it, put whatever size of material I can in here, or slide it up to it, whatever, lock my half nut down, and we're locked back in and ready to tighten up with the handle. You see what I mean? So we can undo that, pop it out, move our material, slide it back up, whatever, tighten down the lock nut or the half nut, and then tighten her down. Now what you're going to be witnessing here is an attempt at leveling everything up. It is kind of a frustrating thing to have to do by yourself, but it's not a big deal as long as you have the tri-stands and the level, and of course the hoist and all that kind of stuff, to move these things around incrementally. You can raise or lower either end of any of the components that we're going to be putting together for the frame, and it really makes it just as easy as can be when you have this stuff. Now, some of those tri-stands are store-bought. We've got an industrial surplus place, had one in town a while back, and I bought a lot of stuff from those guys, and then I used those as a pattern many years ago, and then built my own. So you see some homemade ones as well as a couple of the store-bought or factory ones. But what really comes in handy is the way we use those chain falls in order to make everything level. And you can obviously see my shop dog Layla coming in and out of the picture. She's just having a good time, just kind of trying to get my attention. She's wanting to get me to feed her and play with her a little bit. Now, if you notice what I did, I had clamped a piece of 1/2-inch plate underneath that the back angle to support that, to where I could know that if it's resting on there, it's in the position I want it to be welded in. Now we're going about the business of leveling everything here so that we can put the cross member in up here where we have the camera right now. Okay, there's the two main subframe rails. You can see the 4-foot level on back on the left hand side, as well as one across the corner, but I've got it perfectly level all the way around, and I've got it reasonably square from that corner up to where the first cross member is going to go, right up here to 116.5 inches, and I am just within 1/8 of an inch of square. It wants to move on me whenever I tap it, so what I'll do is I will just put a little spot weld on the top of each one of those back there where it won't move on me, and then I can tap it and get it square. It's within 1/8 of an inch right now. Well, I got the main frame rails cut, got them ground down with the wire wheel and beveled on the ends. We've got those tacked in place on the back of the trailer, and I got the one main cross member that the front of the bed actually rests on, trimmed up, beveled, and ready to stick into place. We've actually stuck it after we squared everything up by, checking crossways of the frame. And of course, we tacked the far end, and then we used a come-along cantywampus, to draw everything together, and got it right directly on target. So we're ready to burn a few rods now. So what I'm going to be using is a GE 300 amp 100% duty cycle light commercial welder, and I'm going to be using a 7018 low hydrogen rod We want to get good penetration on the root pass, or what some people call the stringer. We want to get that burned in really good. Try to get 100% penetration if at all possible. Obviously we're making vertical uphill welds. So I'll buff all the slag out of there. You can see the slag dribbling back down. That should be a fair bead, but we'll put a filler pass on and then probably a cap on top. So this is just the beginning of the process. There's a lot of welding to be done on this before we ever get to the shackles. Now I guess I'm kind of spoiled, you know. I just can't imagine crawling around on my hands and knees, you know, on a concrete floor, or in this particular case out here on the gravel, and try to fabricate something as large as what this is. I mean, it's been done in the past. I've done a number of projects, but believe me, given the option, I'd much rather have this option, because it makes it so much easier. I know you guys probably get tired of me, you know, talking about that, but it really is. And it didn't cost me hardly anything. It's mostly just scrap parts and pieces. Well, I guess it's quite obvious. You can see we've got the basic subframe assembly pretty much welded together. Made 3 passes on them, you know, a root pass and a filler pass, and then put a cap on them. A couple of them will have to be ground down smooth because it comes in contact with the smooth surface under the bed as the bed lowers. But that's why you want to get as good a penetration as possible. But at any rate, what I'm doing now is I put this back up in the air, so it'll be a little easier for me to work on installing those shackles. I've got all the dimensions from the original frame, and I'm going to go ahead and tack those in place, and then double check the measurements, and we'll be burning those in very shortly. That's where we're at right now. So now I got to put the tri-stands back under it, just to make it just that added degree of safety, in addition to the chain hoist. You can see how convenient it is and how nice it is to have these nasty old rusty old chain falls, you know, hanging on a beam. It really makes the job a whole lot easier. Imagine having to muscle this stuff around. This is Tractor Man 44, and I am out of here.